Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. If you've subscribed for more stories, enjoy the ride now. Sergeant Jake Morrison had seen enough combat in 8 years of military service to recognize tactical brilliance when he witnessed it, and what he was watching through the reinforced windows of Titan Base's command center was nothing short of masterful. Princess Lyrana Starfire of the Ethereal Empire moved across the battlefield with fluid precision, her luminescent silver skin catching the harsh light of energy weapon discharges as she coordinated her elite guard's response to the surprise rebel attack. Maven, tactical analysis of Ethereal combat formation, Jake called to the base's AI system, never taking his eyes off the princess as she seamlessly adapted her strategy to counter the rebels' flanking maneuver. Analyzing, Sergeant Morrison, Maven replied in her crisp British accent. Ethereal forces are employing a modified deltoid formation with integrated energy shielding and rapid repositioning protocols. Effectiveness rating: 92% against current threat assessment. She's not just using standard formations, Jake muttered, watching Princess Lyrana gesture commands to her guards with subtle hand signals that somehow conveyed complex tactical information. She's improvising. Look at how she's using the terrain elevation to maximize their energy weapons range while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Indeed, Sergeant. The tactical modifications appear to be real-time adaptations to local environmental factors. Quite impressive for. Maven paused. I'm sorry, are you providing military analysis or expressing personal admiration? Both, Jake admitted, unable to keep the awe out of his voice. The battle ended 15 minutes later with the rebels either captured or retreating, their carefully planned assault completely neutralized by the combined response of human and Ethereal forces. Jake watched Princess Lyrana conduct a swift assessment of her guards, checking each for injuries with the practiced efficiency of someone who genuinely cared about her people's welfare rather than simply maintaining royal dignity. Beautiful, isn't she? Commented Lieutenant Torres, joining Jake at the observation window. I mean, all Ethereans are gorgeous, but royalty takes it to another level. That silver skin practically glows. Jake barely heard him. He was too busy watching Princess Lyrana coordinate post-battle security arrangements with Base Commander Walsh, her strategic thinking already shifting to prevent follow-up attacks. The way she analyzed the rebels' approach routes and suggested defensive improvements showed a military mind that most career officers would envy. Morrison, Torres, you're wanted in the briefing room, called Corporal Kim from the communications station. Command wants full tactical debriefing from all personnel who observed the engagement. The briefing room was crowded with both human and Ethereal personnel, the two species maintaining their usual careful separation despite their official alliance. Princess Lyrana sat at the head of the conference table alongside Commander Walsh, and Jake found himself studying her profile as she discussed defensive improvements with the same intensity she'd shown during combat. Ethereans were undeniably striking, their silver skin seemed to generate its own soft light, their crystalline blue eyes held depths that human eyes couldn't match, and they moved with an otherworldly grace that made even simple gestures appear choreographed. Princess Lyrana embodied all of these traits, but what captured Jake's attention was the sharp intelligence behind those alien features and the way she commanded respect through competence rather than relying on her royal status. The rebels' primary approach utilized the Northwestern Ridge system, Princess Lyrana was explaining, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species but with an underlying authority that commanded attention. Their mistake was assuming we would maintain static defensive positions rather than implementing dynamic response protocols. Jake nodded approvingly at her analysis, impressed by how quickly she'd identified the enemy's tactical errors. Most officers took hours to reach such conclusions after reviewing recorded data. She'd done it in the middle of active combat. Sergeant Morrison, Commander Walsh said suddenly, you had an excellent view of the entire engagement from the command center. What's your assessment of our response effectiveness? Jake straightened in his chair, suddenly aware that Princess Lyrana's crystalline gaze had turned toward him with obvious interest. The coordination between human and Ethereal forces was impressive, sir. But the real tactical achievement was Princess Lyrana's adaptive strategy. She identified the rebels' plan within minutes and countered it with modifications to standard Etherian formations that I've never seen before. A murmur ran through the room, half appreciation from the human personnel, half surprise from the Etherians that a human soldier was providing tactical commentary on their princess's combat performance. Princess Lyrana's eyes remained fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him suddenly self-conscious. "You observed my tactical modifications during the engagement, Sergeant?" "Yes, Your Highness. The way you used the terrain elevation to maximize energy weapon effectiveness while maintaining mobility was textbook application of advanced battlefield geometry. Except it wasn't textbook, it was pure innovation under pressure." "I see," Princess Lyrana said slowly, her tone suggesting Jake had surprised her somehow. "And you found this noteworthy?" "I found it brilliant," Jake replied honestly, too caught up in professional admiration to consider the diplomatic implications of his enthusiasm. "The way you adapted standard formations to counter an unexpected threat while coordinating with human forces showed exactly the kind of tactical flexibility that wins battles." The room had gone completely quiet. Even Commander Walsh looked slightly stunned by Jake's casual analysis of alien royal military strategy. Princess Lyrana continued studying Jake with that unsettling intensity, her crystalline eyes seeming to catalogue every detail of his appearance and demeanor. The silence stretched uncomfortably until she finally spoke. "Why are you gazing at me so intently, human?" The question was delivered in the same tone she might have used to ask about weather conditions, but Jake caught the underlying curiosity, and perhaps a hint of challenge. Around the table, both human and Etherian personnel held their breath, clearly expecting him to stammer out some platitude about her beauty or royal magnificence. Instead, Jake met her gaze directly and answered with the same honesty that had driven his tactical assessment. "Because I've never seen anyone adapt combat strategy that quickly under direct fire," he said simply. "I've served with some exceptional officers, but what you did out there, that was next-level tactical thinking. I was trying to understand how your mind processes battlefield information so rapidly." Princess Lyrana blinked slowly, her expression shifting through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been pleased bewilderment. Around the table, both species were staring at Jake as if he'd announced his intention to challenge the laws of physics. "You were analyzing my tactical methodology?" Princess Lyrana asked, sounding as though she was testing the words in an unfamiliar language. "Yes, Your Highness. I hope that doesn't violate any diplomatic protocols." "Maven," Princess Lyrana called suddenly, "please access your databases on typical human reactions to Etherian royal presence." "Certainly, Princess Lyrana," Maven replied cheerfully. Standard human responses to Etherian royalty include expressions of aesthetic appreciation, requests for audience privileges, attempts to gain favor through complimentary remarks about physical appearance, nervous deference to perceived superior status, and in approximately 12% of cases, complete speechlessness. "I see," Princess Lyrana mused, her gaze returning to Jake. "An analysis of my combat effectiveness would fall into which category?" "I'm afraid that response isn't in my databases, Princess." "It appears to be unprecedented." Jake felt heat creeping up his neck as he realized the entire room was staring at him like he was some kind of diplomatic anomaly. "I apologize if I've somehow offended." "You haven't," Princess Lyrana interrupted, and Jake caught what sounded like genuine amusement in her voice. "But you have certainly surprised me." Commander Walsh cleared his throat pointedly. "Perhaps we should continue the tactical debriefing?" "Of course," Princess Lyrana agreed, but her eyes remained on Jake with an expression of curious evaluation that made him feel like she was solving a puzzle he didn't know he represented. As the briefing continued, Jake tried to focus on the discussion of defensive improvements and security protocols, but he was acutely aware of Princess Lyrana's occasional glances in his direction. Each time their eyes met, he caught that same expression of intrigued assessment, as if she was trying to categorize his reactions according to some system that had never encountered his particular type of response. "One final item," Commander Walsh announced as the meeting drew to a close. Princess Lyrana has graciously agreed to participate in joint training exercises with our personnel over the next week. This will provide valuable experience in coordinated human-Etherian tactical operations. I look forward to observing human combat methodologies, Princess Lyrana said formally, but Jake could have sworn she was looking directly at him when she added, and to better understanding how human tactical thinking differs from our own approaches. After the briefing ended and personnel began filing out, Jake found himself approached by Lieutenant Torres and several other soldiers, all wearing expressions of confused amazement. "Morrison," Torres said quietly, "did you seriously just give tactical feedback to an alien princess? And analyze her combat strategy like you were reviewing training footage?" "She asked why I was looking at her," Jake replied, still not entirely sure why his honest answer had caused such a stir. "She asked why you were staring, and instead of saying something about how beautiful she is, you gave her a performance evaluation." Corporal Kim looked like she couldn't decide whether to laugh or check Jake for head injuries. "Do you have any idea how insane that sounds?" "I wasn't staring because she's beautiful," Jake protested. "I was watching because she's a brilliant tactical commander." "But she is beautiful," Torres pointed out. "Etherians are literally the most aesthetically perfect species humans have ever encountered. That's usually what people notice first." Jake considered this, glancing across the room where Princess Lyrana was conducting a quiet consultation with her guard captain. He had to admit that Torres was right, she was extraordinarily beautiful by any standard. But somehow, her tactical brilliance had overshadowed even her otherworldly appearance. "I guess I was too impressed by her military skills to focus on anything else," Jake said finally. "Maven," Torres called, "is that a normal human response pattern?" "I'm afraid not, Lieutenant Torres," Maven replied with what sounded like electronic bewilderment. "In fact, I'm updating my behavioral databases to include tactical appreciation overriding aesthetic appreciation as a new category of human response to alien interaction." Jake groaned, realizing that his honest reaction to Princess Lyrana's combat expertise had somehow marked him as a psychological anomaly worth scientific documentation. "Great," he muttered. "Now I'm a case study." As he headed toward the exit, Jake caught Princess Lyrana watching him again, her crystalline eyes bright with what looked like genuine curiosity. For a moment, their gazes held across the crowded briefing room, and Jake felt something shift in the way she was looking at him, less like a puzzle to be solved and more like a person she actually wanted to understand. Then she smiled, and Jake realized that her interest in his unprecedented reaction might be just as intriguing to him as his tactical appreciation had been to her. The next morning brought Jake face to face with the reality of joint training exercises, which apparently meant trying to integrate human military protocols with Etherian combat techniques under the watchful eye of Princess Lyrana herself. Jake stood in a main training facility alongside 20 other human soldiers, all of whom seemed determined to either impress the alien princess through excessive formality or avoid her attention entirely. "Maven, please display the training schedule for integrated tactical operations," Princess Lyrana requested as she entered the facility, followed by 6 of her elite guards who moved with the same fluid precision Jake had observed during yesterday's battle. "Certainly, Princess Lyrana," Maven replied, projecting a holographic schedule that looked ambitious even by military standards. Today's exercises include coordinated assault formations, defensive perimeter establishment, energy weapon integration with conventional firearms, and real-time tactical adaptation scenarios. Jake studied the projected schedule with professional interest, noting that several of the exercises were designed to test exactly the kind of improvised strategy he'd witnessed Princess Lyrana demonstrate during the rebel attack. "Sergeant Morrison," Princess Lyrana called, causing every head in the facility to turn toward Jake with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright envy. "You mentioned observing battlefield geometry applications yesterday. Would you care to demonstrate human tactical formations for comparison with our methods?" Jake felt the weight of 20 sets of human eyes and 7 sets of alien ones focused on him with uncomfortable intensity. "Of course, Your Highness. Which type of formation would be most useful for comparison purposes?" Something adaptable to terrain variations and multiple threat vectors, Princess Lyrana replied, moving closer to Jake with that same graceful motion that made her appear to float rather than walk. Your analysis yesterday suggested you understand the principles behind tactical flexibility. Right. Okay. Jake turned to address the other soldiers, slipping into instructor mode with the confidence of someone who trained countless personnel in combat situations. Standard diamond formation, but we're going to modify it for the training facility layout. Torres, Kim, Valdez, you're my base points. Everyone else, adaptive positioning based on sight lines and cover availability. As Jake directed the formation, he was acutely aware of Princess Lyrana watching every movement with the same intense focus he'd shown during her battle performance. Her guards flanked her at respectful distances, but Jake caught them exchanging glances that suggested they found their princess's interest in human tactics unusual. Interesting, Princess Lyrana murmured as Jake's team completed their formation. You prioritize visual communication and positional flexibility over rigid structural adherence. Human combat doctrine emphasizes adaptability over perfection, Jake explained, then caught himself. I mean, not that Etherian methods aren't adaptive, I just meant that humans tend to favor improvisation when standard procedures don't match battlefield conditions. No offense taken, Sergeant. In fact, your observation is quite accurate. Princess Lyrana moved to a position where she could observe both the human formation and her own guards. Maven, please note the tactical variations for analysis purposes. Now, if I may demonstrate Etherian formations. What followed was 15 minutes of the most elegant military coordination Jake had ever witnessed. Princess Lyrana's guards moved like dancers who happened to be carrying advanced energy weapons, their formation shifting and flowing in response to her subtle gestures while maintaining perfect tactical coverage. Jake found himself studying their positioning with the same fascination he might show for a particularly complex piece of engineering. The energy field integration is remarkable, Jake said without thinking, then realized he'd interrupted a royal demonstration. Sorry, Your Highness. I didn't mean to. Please, continue, Princess Lyrana said, holding up a hand to pause her guards. What about the energy field integration interests you? The way your people can maintain overlapping defensive screens while still having clear firing lanes. Human energy weapons don't integrate that smoothly, we have to choose between protection and offense in most tactical situations. Princess Lyrana exchanged a glance with her guard captain, who nodded slightly as if granting permission for something. Would you like to try it? Princess Lyrana asked. Jake blinked. Try what? Energy field integration. Our weapons can be calibrated for human use, and I'm curious to see how your tactical thinking would adapt to our technological capabilities. The training facility went dead silent. Jake looked around at his fellow soldiers, all of whom appeared to be in various states of shock that an alien princess was offering to let a human sergeant handle advanced Etherian military technology. That's allowed? Jake asked. I'm a princess, Lyrana replied with what Jake was beginning to recognize as her version of a smile. I can authorize experimental tactical collaboration if I deem it beneficial to our alliance. Maven, called Lieutenant Torres nervously, are there any regulations prohibiting human personnel from handling Etherian weapons during training exercises? Checking military protocols, Maven replied, her usual cheerfulness replaced by what sounded like electronic confusion. I'm finding no specific prohibitions, though this appears to be the first such request in recorded history. I'm updating my databases accordingly. Princess Lyrana gestured to one of her guards, who approached with what looked like a crystalline rifle that seemed to generate its own internal light. Captain Zephyr will provide basic operational instruction. The principles are similar to your energy weapons, but the integration protocols are more sophisticated. Jake accepted the weapon with appropriate reverence, immediately noticing that it felt almost alive in his hands. Not just the weight and balance, but something that seemed to respond to his intentions before he'd even formed conscious thoughts about targeting. The weapon reads bioelectric patterns, Captain Zephyr explained in accented English. It anticipates user intentions and adjusts output accordingly. For humans, this may require adjustment period. Try a simple targeting exercise first, Princess Lyrana suggested, indicating a holographic projection system at the far end of the facility. Maven, please generate standard tactical scenario. Jake raised the Ethereal weapon, immediately feeling it sync with his nervous system in ways that were both fascinating and slightly disconcerting. The targeting reticle seemed to know where he wanted to aim before he did, and when he squeezed the firing mechanism, the energy beam struck the holographic target with precision that exceeded his normal marksmanship by a significant margin. Remarkable, Jake breathed, staring at the weapon with genuine amazement. It's like it's reading my tactical intentions and optimizing the execution. Exactly, Princess Lyrana said, and Jake caught a note of excitement in her voice. Now try it with movement. Maven, generate mobile targets with defensive positioning. What followed was the most effective tactical exercise Jake had ever participated in. The Ethereal weapon seemed to enhance not just his accuracy but his tactical awareness, providing subtle feedback about target positions and optimal firing solutions that let him engage multiple threats with efficiency that felt almost supernatural. This is incredible, Jake said as the exercise concluded, reluctantly returning the weapon to Captain Zephyr. The integration between technology and tactical thinking is unlike anything in human military doctrine. And your adaptation to it was unlike anything in Ethereal military experience, Princess Lyrana replied. Captain Zephyr, how long did it take Sergeant Morrison to achieve tactical proficiency with our weapons? Approximately 4 minutes, Princess, Captain Zephyr replied, sounding somewhat stunned. Standard Ethereal personnel require minimum 2 hours for basic proficiency. That's impossible, Lieutenant Torres said flatly. Morrison's a good soldier, but nobody adapts to alien weapons technology that quickly. Maven, Princess Lyrana called, please review the tactical exercise recordings and provide analysis of Sergeant Morrison's adaptation rate. Analysis complete, Princess Lyrana, Maven replied after a moment. Sergeant Morrison achieved tactical proficiency with Ethereal energy weapons in 4 minutes and 23 seconds. For comparison purposes, this exceeds the adaptation rate of 98% of recorded Ethereal personnel. Jake felt heat creeping up his neck as everyone in the facility stared at him with expressions ranging from amazement to suspicion. It's the weapon, Jake protested. The bioelectric integration made it easy to. The weapon enhances existing capabilities, Princess Lyrana interrupted gently. It cannot create tactical thinking that isn't already present. Your rapid adaptation suggests an intuitive understanding of integrated combat systems that's quite rare. What does that mean, exactly? Jake asked. It means, Sergeant Morrison, that you may be naturally suited for the kind of advanced tactical collaboration we're attempting to develop between our species. Princess Lyrana studied him with that same intense interest he'd seen during yesterday's briefing. I would like to request your participation in additional training exercises. If you're willing. Jake looked around the facility at his fellow soldiers, most of whom were nodding encouragingly despite their obvious bewilderment at the situation. I'd be honored, Your Highness, Jake replied. Excellent. Maven, please schedule extended tactical collaboration sessions for the remainder of the week. I believe Sergeant Morrison and I have much to learn from each other's approaches to combat strategy. As the formal training exercise concluded and personnel began filing out of the facility, Jake found himself approached by Captain Zephyr, who had maintained a respectful distance during the earlier interactions but now seemed compelled to speak. Sergeant Morrison, Captain Zephyr said quietly, I have served Princess Lyrana for many years. I have never seen her show such interest in tactical collaboration with anyone outside our royal guard. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means, Captain Zephyr replied with what might have been amusement, that you have impressed someone who is not easily impressed. This is significant. Jake glanced across the facility to where Princess Lyrana was reviewing tactical data with Maven, her attention focused on the holographic displays with the same intensity she'd shown during combat. She's remarkable, Jake said quietly. I've never worked with anyone who understands tactical systems at that level. Yes, Captain Zephyr agreed, though his tone suggested he was talking about something beyond tactical abilities. She is indeed remarkable. And I suspect, Sergeant Morrison, that she finds you equally so. As Jake headed back to his quarters, he reflected on the day's unprecedented events. In 24 hours, he'd gone from observing an alien princess's combat performance to being personally invited to participate in advanced tactical training with weapons technology that exceeded human capabilities by centuries. Maven, Jake called as he walked through the base's corridors, am I correct in thinking that Princess Lyrana's interest in tactical collaboration is unusual? According to my databases, Sergeant Morrison, Princess Lyrana has never requested extended training sessions with personnel from other species. Ever. Her interest in your tactical capabilities appears to be entirely unprecedented. Jake paused in the corridor, processing this information. And that means? I'm afraid I lack sufficient data to draw meaningful conclusions, Maven replied. Though I should note that my relationship analysis subroutines are generating some rather interesting hypotheses about the nature of mutual professional admiration between species. Jake groaned, realizing that his attraction to Princess Lyrana's tactical brilliance was apparently obvious enough for an AI to detect and analyze. Please tell me you're not adding this to your behavioral research files. I'm afraid all interactions with alien royalty are automatically archived for diplomatic analysis purposes, Maven replied cheerfully. Though I promise to flag your file as unprecedented interpersonal dynamics requiring further study, rather than anything more embarrassing. That's not reassuring, Maven. Perhaps not, Sergeant. But it is accurate. Jake was reviewing tactical schematics in his quarters when the base's emergency alarms began wailing, their harsh sound cutting through the evening quiet with urgent authority. He was already reaching for his combat gear when Maven's voice crackled through the communication system with uncharacteristic tension. All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple hostile contacts approaching both Titan Base and the Etherian diplomatic outpost. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Jake strapped on his gear and sprinted toward the command center, arriving to find organized chaos as human and Etherian personnel coordinated their response to what appeared to be a carefully planned two-pronged assault. Princess Lyrana stood at the main tactical display alongside Commander Walsh, her luminescent skin providing an eerie contrast to the red emergency lighting as she studied the enemy positions. Sergeant Morrison, Commander Walsh called as Jake entered, we need every qualified soldier on the line. The rebels have launched simultaneous attacks on both locations, clearly hoping to overwhelm our response capabilities. What's our tactical situation? Jake asked, moving to an auxiliary display to review enemy positions and friendly force deployments. 43 hostile contacts at the main base, 68 at the Etherian outpost, Princess Lyrana replied without looking up from her analysis. They're using coordinated assault patterns designed to exploit the communication delay between our locations. Jake studied the tactical display, noting the sophisticated timing of the attacks and the way enemy forces were positioned to prevent mutual support between the two allied installations. They're not just trying to overwhelm us, Jake realized. They're trying to force us to choose which location to defend. If we split our forces evenly, neither position will have enough firepower to repel their attacks. Precisely, Princess Lyrana agreed, finally looking up from the display with grim appreciation for his tactical assessment. And if we concentrate our forces at one location, they achieve their objective of destroying the other. Unless, Jake said slowly, an idea forming as he studied the enemy positions, we don't defend either location conventionally. Princess Lyrana's crystalline eyes sharpened with interest. Explain. They planned this assault assuming we'd use static defensive positions at both sites. But what if we used mobile tactics instead? Abandon fixed defenses and use combined human-Etherian strike teams to disrupt their attack patterns before they can establish siege positions. Commander Walsh looked skeptical. That's an enormous risk, Morrison. If the mobile strategy fails, we lose both installations. If we use conventional defense, we lose one installation for certain and probably both, Jake replied. But if we coordinate mobile strikes using integrated tactical systems. He glanced at Princess Lyrana. Yesterday's training proved that human adaptability combined with ethereal technology creates force multipliers neither side anticipated. Princess Lyrana was already running calculations on the tactical display, her fingers moving over the holographic interface with practiced efficiency. The mathematical models support Sergeant Morrison's assessment, she announced after several moments. Mobile integrated strikes would achieve a success probability of 74% compared to 38% for conventional defense. Maven, Commander Walsh called, "Can you confirm Princess Lyrana's calculations?" "Confirmed, Commander Walsh," Maven replied. "Though I should note that these projections assume optimal coordination between human and ethereal tactical systems, which has never been tested in actual combat situations. Then I guess today we find out if our training exercises translate to real battlefield conditions," Jake said, checking his weapons and communication equipment. "Indeed we do," Princess Lyrana agreed, moving toward the command center's equipment lockers where her guards were preparing their advanced energy weapons. "Captain Zephyr, please configure weapons for human-compatible operation. We'll need full integration for this strategy to succeed." "Princess," Captain Zephyr said carefully, "you're not suggesting that you personally participate in mobile combat operations?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Princess Lyrana replied firmly. "This tactical approach requires real-time coordination between human and ethereal capabilities. I'm the most qualified ethereal officer available for that coordination." "Your Highness," Commander Walsh interjected, "with all due respect, we cannot risk alien royalty in direct combat operations. The diplomatic implications will be irrelevant if both installations are destroyed because we failed to implement effective tactics," Princess Lyrana cut him off. "Commander, my military rank is equivalent to your colonel-level authority. I'm qualified to make tactical decisions regarding ethereal personnel deployment." Jake watched this exchange with growing respect for Princess Lyrana's willingness to risk her own safety for the mission's success, but also with increasing concern about the personal stakes involved. "Your Highness," Jake said quietly, "if something happens to you during this operation, then it happens while I'm serving alongside allies I respect, implementing tactics that offer our best chance of success," Princess Lyrana replied, meeting his gaze with steady determination. "That's an acceptable risk." 20 minutes later, Jake found himself crouched behind cover in the rocky terrain surrounding the rebel positions, carrying an ethereal energy weapon that felt as familiar as his standard-issue rifle despite having used it for less than 6 hours total. Princess Lyrana was positioned 30 meters to his left, her silver skin almost invisible against the moonlit stones as she coordinated with her guards through silent hand signals. "Maven, status on strike teams 2 and 3, Jake whispered into his communication device. "Strike Team 2 has achieved Overwatch position at grid reference 77 Alpha, Maven replied through his earpiece. "Strike Team 3 is encountering unexpected resistance at the Ethereal outpost but maintaining operational parameters." Jake acknowledged the report and signaled Princess Lyrana, who nodded and began moving toward the first target position with fluid grace that made her nearly impossible to track visually. Jake followed, marveling at how the ethereal tactical approach transformed individual movement into something approaching stealth artistry. The first engagement lasted less than 3 minutes. Jake's human tactical training combined with ethereal weapon technology created devastating effectiveness against enemies who had prepared for conventional resistance. Princess Lyrana's coordination of the strike kept them moving too quickly for effective counterattacks while maintaining constant pressure on rebel positions. "Target cluster eliminated," Princess Lyrana reported as they moved toward the second objective. "Sergeant Morrison, your adaptation to integrated tactics under actual combat conditions is extraordinary." "Your coordination makes it possible," Jake replied, reloading his energy weapon while scanning for new threats. "I've never experienced battlefield awareness like this." "Nor have I," Princess Lyrana admitted. The combination of human tactical flexibility with ethereal technological precision creates capabilities that exceed either approach independently. They continued moving through the rebel positions, systematically dismantling the carefully planned assault through coordinated strikes that the enemy had no framework for countering. Jake found himself thinking less like a human soldier using alien weapons and more like part of an integrated tactical system that transcended species boundaries. "Jake," Princess Lyrana said suddenly, using his first name for the first time, "we have a problem." Jake immediately shifted position to cover her approach to his location. "What is it?" "Long-range surveillance indicates rebel reinforcements approaching both targets. Approximately 20 additional hostiles per location." Princess Lyrana's expression was grim as she shared her tactical display. "Our mobile strategy is succeeding, but we may not have sufficient time to complete objectives before reinforcements arrive." Jake studied the new intelligence, calculating timing and force ratios with growing concern. "We need to accelerate the operation, but that means taking greater risks with smaller safety margins." "Agreed. Are you willing to attempt advanced coordination protocols?" "What does that involve?" Princess Lyrana hesitated for a moment, then met his eyes with an intensity that made Jake's breath catch. "Temporary psychic linking. It would allow real-time sharing of tactical awareness and instantaneous coordination of actions. But the neural integration between species is intense and untested." Jake understood immediately that she was offering something far beyond normal tactical collaboration, a level of mental connection that would be profoundly intimate regardless of its military applications. "What are the risks?" he asked. "Unknown. The psychic resonance between human and ethereal consciousness could create anything from enhanced combat effectiveness to complete neural overload." Jake looked at the tactical display showing reinforcements approaching their positions, then at Princess Lyrana's face, reading determination mixed with vulnerability in her alien features. "If we don't try it, we lose both installations and probably get everyone killed anyway," Jake said. "That's my assessment as well." "Then let's do it." Princess Lyrana moved closer, placing her hands on either side of Jake's head with surprising gentleness. "This may feel unusual." The psychic link activated like lightning striking inside Jake's mind. Suddenly he could perceive the battlefield through Princess Lyrana's enhanced senses, feeling enemy positions as clearly as his own heartbeat while simultaneously sharing his tactical instincts with her consciousness. The integration was overwhelming and intimate beyond anything he'd experienced, but it also created perfect tactical synergy. They moved through the remaining rebel positions like a single organism with two bodies, Jake's adaptability guiding Princess Lyrana's precision while her enhanced capabilities amplified his strategic thinking. The psychic connection allowed them to coordinate actions without communication delays, responding to threats and opportunities with superhuman effectiveness. "Maven," Jake said as they eliminated the final rebel position, "status on reinforcements?" "Neutralized, Sergeant Morrison," Maven replied with obvious amazement. "Strike teams at both locations report complete mission success with minimal casualties. Time to operation completion, 47 minutes. Previous records for similar tactical scenarios, approximately 4 hours with 60% casualty rates." Jake and Princess Lyrana maintained their psychic link as they regrouped with the other strike teams, the mental connection allowing them to process the battle's aftermath with shared perspective. Through her consciousness, Jake experienced the profound satisfaction that came from protecting both their peoples, while Princess Lyrana felt his deep respect for her courage and tactical brilliance. "The psychic integration," Princess Lyrana said quietly as they walked back toward the base, "how did it feel?" "Like I was finally thinking clearly for the first time in my life," Jake replied honestly. "Like all the tactical training I've ever received suddenly made perfect sense because I could perceive the battlefield the way you do. For me, it felt like discovering that courage and determination aren't uniquely ethereal traits," Princess Lyrana said softly. "Your human perspective brought qualities to our tactical thinking that I never realized were missing." They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, both processing the profound intimacy of the psychic connection and its implications beyond military cooperation. "Jake," Princess Lyrana said finally, "what we shared tonight, that level of mental integration between our species. Was probably the most remarkable experience of my life, Jake finished. Both tactically and personally. Princess Lyrana stopped walking and turned to face him directly. The personal aspects of psychic linking aren't mentioned in military protocols. No, Jake agreed, they're not. When Etherians share consciousness that intimately, it typically indicates. She paused, seeming to search for appropriate words. Significant emotional attachment. Jake felt his heart racing as he realized what she was trying to tell him. And for humans, that level of trust and mental connection usually means. Yes, Princess Lyrana said softly. I believe it does. They stood facing each other in the moonlight, both understanding that the tactical partnership they developed had evolved into something far more complex and personally significant than either had expected. 3 days after the successful joint operation, Jake found himself summoned to Commander Walsh's office alongside Princess Lyrana for what Maven had diplomatically termed, post-mission strategic consultation. The formal language couldn't disguise the fact that news of their unprecedented tactical collaboration, and the psychic linking that had made it possible, had reached the highest levels of both human and Etherian military command. Sergeant Morrison, Princess Lyrana, Commander Walsh began, gesturing for them to take seats across from his desk. I've received communications from both Terran Defense Command and the Etherian High Council regarding your innovative tactical approach. Jake exchanged glances with Princess Lyrana, noting the carefully neutral expression she'd adopted for official discussions. Since their psychic linking experience, they'd maintained professional distance in public settings, but Jake could still sense the emotional connection that had developed between them. Are we in trouble, sir? Jake asked. That remains to be determined, Commander Walsh replied. The tactical success is undeniable. You prevented the destruction of both installations with minimal casualties using techniques that neither military doctrine anticipated. However, the methods you employed have raised questions about the implications of such intimate cooperation between species. Princess Lyrana straightened in her chair. Commander Walsh, if the concern is about psychic linking protocols, I accept full responsibility for that tactical decision. The risk was mine to take as the ranking Etherian officer. Actually, Your Highness, the concern is quite the opposite, Commander Walsh said, activating his desk's holographic display to show a detailed analysis of their mission performance. Both commands want to understand how your collaboration achieved such extraordinary results. The force multiplication ratios you demonstrated exceed all theoretical projections for human-Etherian tactical integration. Jake studied the displayed data, noting efficiency ratings that seemed almost impossible. These numbers can't be accurate. We were effective, but not superhuman. Maven, please confirm the tactical analysis data, Princess Lyrana requested. Data confirmed, Princess Lyrana, Maven replied cheerfully. Your integrated strike team eliminated hostile targets with 96% efficiency while sustaining 0 casualties and completing objectives in 62% of projected time parameters. These results exceed the performance of either species operating independently by factors that military analysts are describing as unprecedented. The question, Commander Walsh continued, is whether these results can be replicated with other personnel, or if they represent unique compatibility between you two specifically. Jake felt heat creeping up his neck as he realized the conversation was heading toward territory that would force them to address the personal aspects of their tactical partnership. Commander, Jake said carefully, the psychic linking component requires significant trust between participants. It's not something that could be implemented casually with random personnel pairings. Define significant trust, Sergeant. Jake looked at Princess Lyrana, who nodded slightly as if giving him permission to speak honestly. The level of mental intimacy required for combat-effective psychic linking is profound, sir. It involves sharing not just tactical awareness but emotional states, personal motivations, and fundamental psychological responses. Most people wouldn't be comfortable with that degree of mental connection with someone they'd known for only a few days. I see, Commander Walsh said thoughtfully. And Princess Lyrana, from the Etherian perspective? Psychic linking of that intensity typically occurs only between individuals who have formed deep personal bonds, Princess Lyrana replied with diplomatic precision. It requires absolute trust and emotional compatibility that cannot be artificially created through training or protocol. Commander Walsh leaned back in his chair, studying both of them with an expression Jake couldn't quite interpret. So what you're telling me is that your tactical breakthrough was possible because you've developed a personal relationship that goes beyond professional collaboration? Jake and Princess Lyrana exchanged another glance, both understanding that their answer would have implications far beyond military strategy. Yes, sir, Jake said finally. That's exactly what we're telling you. Maven, Commander Walsh called, please display the communications I received from High Command and the Etherian Council. The holographic display shifted to show official messages from both governments. Jake read through them with growing amazement, realizing that instead of criticism or concern, both commands were expressing enthusiasm about the tactical innovations they'd demonstrated. They want us to establish a training program? Princess Lyrana asked, sounding as surprised as Jake felt. More than that, Commander Walsh replied. Both governments want to create a permanent joint military academy focused on developing integrated human-Etherian tactical capabilities. They're offering you both positions as co-directors of the program. Jake stared at the display, processing the implications. They want to formalize our partnership into an official military position. Not just your partnership, Sergeant. Your relationship. The personal bond that made your tactical success possible. Commander Walsh's expression grew serious. They understand that the level of trust and compatibility you've demonstrated can't be manufactured through standard training. They want to identify other human-Etherian pairs with similar potential and develop protocols for nurturing those partnerships. Sir, Princess Lyrana said quietly, are you saying that both our governments are officially endorsing romantic relationships between our species as a military strategy? I'm saying that both governments recognize that some of the most significant advances in interspecies cooperation have emerged from personal connections rather than political treaties, Commander Walsh replied. Your tactical success is being viewed as proof that intimate partnerships between humans and Etherians can create capabilities that benefit both peoples. Jake felt his mind reeling as he processed this information. So instead of being diplomatic complications, our feelings for each other are being treated as military assets? More accurately, they're being recognized as the foundation for revolutionary advances in cooperative defense strategies, Commander Walsh corrected. The question is whether you're both willing to accept positions that would make your personal relationship a matter of official policy interest. Princess Lyrana was quiet for several moments, apparently considering the implications from multiple angles. Commander Walsh, she said finally, would this position require us to demonstrate our relationship for training purposes? Because I should mention that Etherian courtship customs include certain privacy expectations that might conflict with public military protocols. Actually, Your Highness, the proposal specifically includes provisions for maintaining personal privacy while utilizing your tactical innovations for training purposes, Commander Walsh replied. You would be developing curriculum and training methods, not serving as relationship examples for other personnel. What would our actual responsibilities involve? Jake asked. Establishing tactical integration protocols that other human-Etherian partnerships could adapt to their own capabilities, Commander Walsh explained. Developing equipment and communication systems that optimize interspecies cooperation. And most importantly, creating a framework for identifying and nurturing the kind of trust-based partnerships that make advanced tactical integration possible. Jake looked at Princess Lyrana, noting the careful consideration in her crystalline eyes as she processed the offer. It would mean permanent assignment together, she said softly. Yes. An official recognition of your relationship as a diplomatic and military asset rather than a potential complication. Maven, Princess Lyrana called, what are the typical career implications for military personnel who accept positions in experimental programs? Historically, such assignments either result in significant advancement opportunities or complete career termination, depending on program success, Maven replied helpfully. However, your situation is unprecedented, so standard historical patterns may not apply. No pressure, Jake muttered. The decision is yours, Commander Walsh said. Both governments will respect whatever choice you make. But I should mention that your tactical innovations from the other night have already prevented 3 similar rebel attacks at other installations. The techniques you developed are saving lives. Jake felt the weight of that responsibility, understanding that their personal relationship had somehow become connected to broader questions of interspecies cooperation and mutual defense. Your Highness, Jake said formally, what are your thoughts about accepting this assignment? Princess Lyrana smiled at his diplomatic phrasing, apparently recognizing his attempt to give her space for an official response. Sergeant Morrison, she replied with matching formality, I believe our tactical compatibility demonstrates significant potential for advancing interspecies military cooperation. From a strategic perspective, accepting this position would serve both our people's interests. And from a personal perspective? Jake asked quietly. From a personal perspective, Princess Lyrana said, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone, I can't imagine working with anyone else who would understand tactical integration at the level we've achieved. Or trust me enough to share consciousness during combat operations. Then we're in agreement. We are. Commander Walsh nodded approvingly. Excellent. I'll transmit your acceptance to both commands immediately. Your new ranks and position assignments should be finalized within the week. 6 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the newly established Interspecies Tactical Institute, reviewing training schedules with General Ambassador Lyrana Starfire, her official title combining her military rank with diplomatic status. The institute had exceeded all projections, successfully training 15 human-Etherian tactical partnerships to varying degrees of integration, though none had achieved the level of psychic linking that Jake and Lyrana maintained. Maven, status report on Training Group 7, Lyrana requested as they reviewed the day's exercises. Training Group 7 has achieved basic tactical coordination and is progressing toward intermediate integration protocols, Maven replied. Though I should note that their partnership development is following more conventional patterns than yours. Meaning they're not falling in love during tactical exercises? Jake asked with amusement. Precisely, Colonel Morrison. Their relationship remains strictly professional, which appears to limit their tactical integration potential but also reduces psychological complexity significantly. Jake looked at Lyrana, noting the way afternoon light played across her silver skin as she studied the training data. Even after months of working together, he still found himself amazed by her tactical brilliance and the ease with which they shared both professional and personal intimacy. Any regrets about accepting this assignment? Jake asked. Only one, Lyrana replied, moving closer to him with that familiar graceful motion that still made his breath catch. I regret that it took a diplomatic crisis and tactical emergency for us to realize how compatible we are. Well, we're both military personnel. We probably would have figured it out eventually through training exercises. Perhaps. Though I doubt standard exercises would have required psychic linking. True. That was definitely a unique circumstance. They worked in comfortable silence for several minutes, their enhanced mental connection allowing them to coordinate complex scheduling tasks with minimal verbal communication. After months of practice, they could maintain low-level psychic linking throughout their daily activities, creating an intimacy that neither had imagined possible between different species. Jake, Lyrana said suddenly, there's something I should mention about the graduation ceremony next week. What about it? Both governments want to make it a significant diplomatic event. Full media coverage, delegates from multiple worlds, formal recognition of our program success. That sounds appropriately official. Why do you look concerned? Lyrana hesitated, then smiled with an expression that combined nervousness and excitement. Because they've also requested that we announce our engagement during the ceremony. Apparently, our relationship has become a symbol of successful interspecies cooperation, and they want to celebrate it publicly. Jake stared at her, processing this unexpected development. They want us to get engaged as a diplomatic gesture. They want to formally recognize what we've already become, Lyrana corrected gently. The engagement would simply be making official what both our peoples already understand about our relationship. And what do you want? I want to marry the human who impressed me by caring more about my tactical abilities than my royal status, Lyrana said softly. The soldier who trusts me enough to share consciousness during combat and who makes me laugh during strategic planning sessions. Jake moved closer, taking her hands in his with the familiarity that had developed through months of psychic connection and shared experiences. I want to marry the alien princess who chose battlefield courage over diplomatic safety, Jake replied. The brilliant commander who taught me that tactical integration is really just another form of trust. Maven, Lyrana called without taking her eyes off Jake's face, please note in our personal files that Colonel Morrison and General Ambassador Starfire have reached mutual agreement regarding permanent partnership status. Congratulations, Maven replied with obvious pleasure. Should I begin planning wedding logistics? Because I should warn you that coordinating interspecies royal military ceremonies involves significantly more complex protocols than standard diplomatic events. You can start with the basics, Jake said, still looking at Lyrana with wonder at how completely his life had changed since that first tactical briefing. We'll figure out the complicated parts together. We always do, Lyrana agreed, and Jake felt through their psychic link the deep contentment and love that matched his own feelings. As they returned to their work planning the next phase of the Institute's expansion, Jake reflected on how a simple question about tactical observation had led to revolutionary military innovations, diplomatic breakthroughs, and the most profound personal relationship of his life. Hey, Lyrana, Jake said as they reviewed applications for the next training class. Yes. For the record, I'm still impressed by your tactical abilities. Even more now than that first day. Good, Lyrana replied with the smile that had become his favorite sight in the galaxy. Because I plan to keep impressing you for the rest of our lives.